Good morning, everyone. Do you remember Mark Norman, Vice Admiral retired Mark Norman? He was from a very public trial last year. Yeah, and it collapsed, and the Trudeau government ended up paying him some money, and he was told to, he quietly left. And breaking his quiet, he says, through Twitter. Leadership means facing problems, not avoiding them. Wouldn't it be nice if the millions of Canadians struggling with the challenges of the pandemic could just hit the reset button and prorogue their responsibilities? I think that it's an interesting choice to be weighing in on this, and I'm glad to see it. It's very interesting the way he left, and I'd love to hear his story, but I don't know that we will. But going forward, presumably he won't be tied up. So it's interesting that he's weighing in. Now, yesterday, Pierre did a 5-minute long speech, and I'm gonna show you two clips from it. But there's already been a lot of clips. CTV News started with this clip, and I saw some Liberal responses to this, claiming that Mr. Poilievre this wasn't a good press conference. I think it was a very effective press conference. And they're trying to gaslight him in the comments that I saw, saying that, his concerns weren't really concerns, and that the things that he's worried about aren't really problematic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is the same kind of social media warfare that we've been used to since 2016, right? They'll gaslight you, and they'll browbeat you, and until you just don't want to be on the platform anymore, right? Goodbye, Facebook, right? I don't know how anybody can spend time on that platform, really. So that was an interesting response from some Liberal people on Twitter and some other places that I saw. And here's a 30-second clip of the end part of this, is where he declares it's a cover-up. And Canaditude says, well, apparently PM Trudeau has moved from blackface to blacking out the evidence. Yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, so here's the two clips that I want to show you. First is the besties clip. And they were making fun of him for doing the quotes, but that's what you do when you're quoting somebody. You should quote them, right? I don't know. Anyway, I think that I thought it was an effective 5 minutes. Watch it. Watch all of it. It's very interesting. Links in the description. Here we go.
The same public servant writes another email to one of her colleagues in which she says that we is connecting with my minister's office. They are all besties. Besties. The finance minister's office is besties with the we organization that they're attempting to give $500 million. Then we have another email from the same public servant to the Privy Council office, in which she says, in direct contradiction to what Justin Trudeau testified under oath, that the Prime Minister's office was, quote, weighing in. This is in April, well before the May 8th date when the Prime Minister claimed he first learned of it.
So, I mean, that's egregious. Oh, just a voice. Hold on. That's egregious, right? Like that's pretty blatant lying under oath, right? Hold on. I'll cue up the next clip. Okay, here he is again for the second half. We're going to go to where he starts talking about Coverup, I think. Here we go.
Another email from Craig Kielburger that went to someone in the government the same day he spoke to Bill Morneau on the phone, but we don't know who received the email, that's blacked out, or what the email said, all blacked out. Here's an email from the minister responsible for the department that granted the $500 million to her top bureaucrat. Again, all the substance is blacked out. And that would not be the first time. Next page, blacked out. This page, blacked out. This page, blacked out. This page, blacked out. Why don't we ask what's in those pages at a parliamentary committee? Well, I'll tell you why. Justin Trudeau shut down those parliamentary committees. When did he do it? The same day these documents became public. What a coincidence. The Prime Minister goes to the Governor General's office and says, Gigi, I'm about to release some very damning information, but I've covered it in black ink, and if you'll just shut down Parliament for me today, then none of the opposition politicians can force me to remove that ink and reveal the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a cover-up.
This is a cover-up. This is a cover-up. I like the GG. I think I'll just start calling her GG. All right, GG. But really, I mean, The Harper prorogation was to stop a collapse of his government, his prime ministership, and I think somebody said they would have seen Stéphane Dion become prime minister. I think that's accurate. I think they were going to declare lack of confidence in Harper and have the Liberal installed. But then prorogation, right? And I was saying they play to win, and it looks like Trudeau's actually playing to cover his hide. I thought he was playing at a higher level, or at least the people who are managing him are playing at a higher level. And it looks like no, they're just trying to clean up the absolute terror that Justin Trudeau and his crony giveaways to his friends has unleashed, because now they're in real trouble of having this government fall. Now we're still not there. The NDP need to come on board, and they're not on board yet. And we'll get there. We're going to get through this we stuff first, okay? And because the we stuff is the reason the government prorogued. This is the stuff they wanted to bury. I can't make that any more clear. That's exactly why they did this. There is no question about that. Okay, here it is. Pierre Poilievre says finance official says government used loosey-goosey logic for $900 million student grant. Okay, so this is the email, and it says, Andrea, I told Brian that we didn't have the funding proposal for CSSG, but we could give the loosey-goosey logic we used for the $900 million, including that all students, including CURB recipients, could access the CSSG. I would imagine that's to inflate numbers, but that's interesting. Here's the news report on that, or sorry, that's Blacklock's reporter. Okay, sorry. These are kind of related but separate. And then there's two that are the same news report. This is Blacklock's reporter, and she says Clerk of the House of Commons Finance Committee refuses to release documents to the public. The only clerk to do so. The only clerk to refuse to release the documents. So that's an interesting development as well. Link is in the description. Here's Pierre Poilievre again, and he says, remember when Trudeau claimed that we was the only group that could run a paid volunteer program? Treasury Board officials noted that there was no evidence we had the capacity to undertake this work. And here's the screenshot from there's 5,000 pages of documents released yesterday. A lot of it was blacked out, but this was not. It says TBS notes that ESD had not provided evidence to suggest that we charities possess the capability to undertake this work, especially under the accelerated timelines. Furthermore, the tracking of hours by third party could be challenging and result in potential integrity concerns should students not be honest about the hours accrued. And yeah, that's true. Also, they're unilingual. They don't speak French and can't deliver the program in Quebec. But whatever, just give them the $900 million and we'll sort it out later. Here's breaking. Treasury Board officials told Trudeau that We Charity did not have capacity to handle the contract. He was told. We can see it in the emails here, right? Here's moving on. Suspension of Parliament has delayed disclosure of speaking fees paid to members of the Prime Minister's wife and family. Yes, this whole thing is meant to shut that down and prevent the Canadian public from finding out exactly who was paid what through what mechanisms, etc., and who knew what when, right? The emails are of how this deal got brokered, and even what's been released already looks not great. And that's not my words. That's a headline I'll show you in a minute or two. CBC's reporting. Conservatives claim cover-up after Trudeau shuts down Parliament. PMO says new documents show public servants made plan to give We Charity deal to run student volunteer program. And so the public servants here is Rachel Wernick. Rachel Wernick is the brother of Michael Wernick, former Privy Council clerk, disgraced Privy Council clerk who left because he sat on the House of Commons floor and spun crazy conspiracy theories about the Prime Minister being assassinated. Go watch it. It's wild. I usually get it, but there's no point. It's interesting how much is being made of the public service and how much of the recommendation and all that other stuff, but these connections, they're not drawing them. I don't know why. Wernick is not... I mean, why is the clerk of the Privy Council's sister a high-placed person? Why is she the one making that decision? Why isn't anybody else asking that question, right? Like, did you have conversations with your brother about this at all? No? Really? Back to this. Conservative MPs are accusing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of a cover-up by shutting down Parliament to dodge scrutiny of his government's role in the We Charity student grant controversy. During a news conference in Ottawa, finance critic Pierre Poilievre and ethics critic Michael Barrett brandished the documents released by the government to a committee probing the affair, which were heavily redacted. They say that amounts to a cover-up, and that's basically it. I showed you why they think it's a cover-up, Mr. Poilievre, through the pages on the ground, and yeah, I would agree with them. I think that's an accurate reading of the situation, right? Here's Rex Murphy, and he says, Prorogue Parliament? What Parliament? Cutting right to the heart of it, sir. I like it. Mercedes Stephenson moving into the potential criminal examination? Yeah, right. Examination. There's nothing like that in the Canadian Code of Law. Hold on. But it doesn't matter. Mercedes Stephenson carries on. Breaking. RCMP tells Global News that they are examining decision to give We Charity deal to run student services program. I wonder if they gave it to a co-op student. Can you examine this? Read these articles. See if anything comes up in the Facebook and the Twitter. You know? Updated. We received this statement from the RCMP after inquiring, as noted in the story, as it is relevant if the RCMP are investigating. They say they are not they're examining, which is not a criminal investigation, as noted in the story. Especially in the wake of parliamentary prorogue, we discovered after posting the story, CP had published the same statement from the RCMP last month. CP is Canadian Press. I actually had Google search looking for a previous article to see if the statement had been out there, and it didn't show up, posting in interest of transparency. So good job on Mercedes Stephenson's point there. Global News is reporting RCMP examining decision to give We Charity deal to run student services program. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police say they are examining the decision by the federal government to give We Charity a deal to administer a now cancelled student grant program. Global News on Wednesday asked the National Police Force whether the RCMP is investigating the Liberal government's decision to award a contract to the We Charity Foundation to administer the $900 million federal student grant program. A spokesperson for the force responded as follows. The RCMP is examining this matter carefully with all available information and will take appropriate action as required. It would be inappropriate for us to provide any more further comments on this matter at this time. The RCMP similarly said last year it was examining the SNC Lavalin case. When Global News is making that connection, I mean, you know, it's pretty obvious, right? An examination is not the same as a formal criminal investigation. Here's Andy Brooke, and he says, as a former RCMP, I am not familiar with the term examining. The matter has been investigated and assigned a case number, therefore it is an investigation. It's not complicated. There is no such thing as a sort of investigation. So, to me, and Mr. Brooks says the same. He says, I'll be blunt here. Use of examining has all the appearances of political triage, and with it, interference. Almost B is the magnitude of alleged offense. Here's the starting point: conspiracy to commit fraud on government pursuant to Section 121 Criminal Code. So that's what he thinks that it could be charged under. But when they say they're sort of investigating it, or they're sort of examining it, that means nothing's going to happen, right? We're examining it, and we'll take action as required. They haven't taken action yet, right? And it's not like there isn't a criminal code to cite, according to Andy Brooke. So either they're investigating it or they're not. Examining is not an investigation, right? So the Liberals are trying to stop people from finding out about this. The RCMP doesn't seem interested in pursuing justice in this. And the opinion polls, they all kind of look like, finally, the truth behind the We scandal, it doesn't look good for the Liberals, right? The opinion is not with this political party, and yet they're behaving as if this is exactly what Canadians want them to do, which is the way they always behave. And regardless of whether you agree or disagree, I think that in an effort to maintain a standard of transparency, there needs to be a proper investigation into what's been going on here. And I don't think that that's bipartisan, although they've changed healthcare to being bipartisan, haven't they? So there's even the rule of law seems to be a bipartisan issue these days. Black Lives Matter is also defund police, right? So, you know, why would we investigate the corrupt cronyism of our government if that would lead to charges, right? Defund police, right? So, I mean, maybe it is partisan. Maybe it is partisan to expect that everybody would want to get to the truth of this. But that to me is incredible. Either we live in a city, either we live in a country, in a community, in a society, Western society, where the rule of law is paramount and everyone should be equal in the eyes of the law. That's what racism was about when I was growing up. Everybody needs to be equal. The law needs to be just. Justice should be blind to the color of your skin and look at what happened. What did you do? What choices did you make that led you to be in this situation? And we've turned it on its head, to look at group guilt, where somebody who potentially owned slaves or whose family owned slaves is guilty, but somebody who lights a fire hall, or a courthouse on fire, is not guilty of anything. So you know what I mean? Like, rule of law either means something or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, well, the people who are making choices like being violent to peaceful people are going to be upset when the peaceful people are no longer peaceful. And I'm talking about the rioters in Portland, the Antifa people who are walking around like they own the place, mostly there. It's not going to end well when people get fed up, or when people realize, or if the government doesn't step up to protect them, that the government's not going to protect them. If people realize that, then they're going to take it into their own hands, and that's not going to end well. The whole reason that you don't have blood feuds is because the rule of law is such that the community is supposed to take care of an injustice. If the community doesn't take care of injustice, then people have to take it into their own hands, right? Like, and blood feuds aren't a great way to run society, I'll tell you. From the reading that I've done, doesn't end well. It's not great, especially with our birth rates. Right? Okay. Anthony Fury says, we're getting to the point where it is becoming the ethical duty of the opposition parties to vote against the September throne speech, regardless of where any of them are in the polls and fundraising. Yeah, I've said a lot that I don't think the NDP want an election. They don't want an election. They're much more powerful right now. And an election would likely, well, I mean, they might gain seats. But Jagmeet Singh desperately wants to tax the wealthy. I mean, I don't know who he thinks are wealthy, but he thinks that they're not paying enough. Did you guys ever see the Sarah Huckabee Sanders, or Sarah Sanders Huckabee Sanders analogy, the bar tab analogy? This is what Jagmeet Singh says here is playing to his base. The base that thinks that corporations and whatever are robbing from the poor people to take all that money. Yeah, corporate profits are big. And that is a byproduct of that being the measure for the stock market, et cetera, right? Like, if your profits aren't increasing, then you're going to get replaced as CEO or whatever. And maybe that's a bad idea. But the free market and capitalism has raised more people out of poverty than any other system in human history. It's not perfect. Never said it was. But there's always going to be a situation where their disaffected people stack up at the bottom. There's a principle, Pareto principle, I think, that Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot. And that's going to happen. There are people who aren't good at singing. So only a few people who are good at singing are going to rise to the top of singing, right? Only a few books in the grand scheme of how many are printed every year are going to be read and purchased. And only a very few books are going to be on the bestseller list, right? Like, it's just, that is what it is. And if you are not as good a singer, being forced to be the best is maybe not great for you. I'm getting off topic, but realistically, this socialism idea doesn't work in practice. All it does is make things worse. Here's Jagmeet saying about wanting a wealth tax to vote for the throne speech in September. But he should not vote for that. He should bring down the government. Here we go.
It's a knee-jerk reaction that the working class people have to bear the brunt, but the wealthiest are never asked to pay their share. So I'd like to see a wealth tax. I'd like to see the richest Canadians, the wealthiest, those at the very, very top who have actually increased their net wealth over this time period during the pandemic. We want to see the wealthiest Canadians contribute their fair share. That's something very important. We want to see investments in making sure people can go back to work safely. Childcare is something very essential.
So this isn't a serious conversation about what they're asking for from the Liberals. I don't necessarily think, because I don't think Trudeau's going to pack a wealth tax into the throne speech, because nobody's going to vote for that except Jagmeet Singh, which, and that's what he needs. So I mean, maybe he will, to avoid the government falling on the throne speech. He might, if that's the sticking point. But Jagmeet should go and watch this. The bar tab analogy, and if you haven't seen it, when I was Ontario Poly and the NDP were pushing the same ridiculous talking points, I went through the animation of this. The animation of this. Before Miss Sanders used it, I think. I can't remember the exact dates, but yeah, it was incredible how, if people don't understand how taxes work, especially in Canada, how things are structured, and understand that the people who make more money pay a lot in taxes. It's not like you make more money and you shelter your taxes. Now, there's a certain point, and Bill Morneau would know about this, where you're making enough that you have to shelter your taxes, right? And you got to get that account in the Caribbean. Just ask Bill Morneau about it, right? He was on the Panama Papers. He was on the Bermuda Papers, or the Barbados Papers. There's some other Caribbean thing. It was meant to be like the not quite Panama Papers, because we were supposed to just accept that he's the finance minister and you can't do anything about it. Right. Sure. Anyway, Ask Bill Morneau about sheltering taxes, and then re-listen to Jagmeet Singh's unbelievable demand that the rich people pay for it all, because I guarantee you who he thinks are the rich people and who you think are the rich people are different people. Okay, John Ivison, he's a columnist. He says, I'm on vacation, but I can't stop watching the train wreck taking place in slow motion in Ottawa. Trudeau has now removed the only person in cabinet with business experience and handed the task of economic recovery to a journalist. As a journalist, I find that concerning. Yes. As a pseudo-journalist, talking ahead, guy who collects things up and just kind of tells a story every day about what's going on in our world, I am concerned too. Because, man, there are some intelligent journalists. There are some really, really spot-on people who make connections that you think, man, how did you even pull that one out? Or they make phone calls and they connect dots that you just think there was no way you could possibly have figured that out. They still shouldn't be in charge of finance of a country. Like, you have to know things when you're in charge of finance for a country. And one of the first things you should know is that you can't also be the prime minister or deputy prime minister of the country while you're taking care of the finances. But you know what they're planning? Oh, just wait for it. Just wait for it. Hold on. Here's some other stuff. Blocked by Rempel, so I don't see Miss Rempel's tweets anymore. But she said, from one woman to another in politics, congrats to Chrystia for breaking this glass ceiling. She really was the only choice. This is her well-deserved honor, her rescuing Trudeau, not him making an appointment. Ooh, I think you're counting some chickens there before they're hatched there, Michelle. Why is everybody in the Globalist Party giving the congratulations to Chrystia Freeland? I saw Kenny, I saw Doug Ford, I saw Michelle once was a conservative Rempel, right? Living in Oklahoma while governing the country of Canada. Why not? I don't see a problem with this. You see a problem with this? Oh yeah. Okay. Sure, Michelle. Here's Yves Giroux, and he's saying, I'm not going to play it right now. I'm already over. He says, changing finance ministers right now, like changing pilots while the plane is flying. I think you could, there's like a co-pilot, so you could probably do that. I'm going to the bathroom, Jim. You just take over there. So that's okay. But he was making the connection of we're building the plane as we're flying it for the economy, and he's saying like you're changing pilots. I think maybe the better analogy would be like changing the construction crew of this aircraft that's in progress, changing it from Bombardier to the TTC guys or whatever. That's a bad analogy. But he says, it's a bad idea, not so great. He says he doesn't comment on politics often, but it's not so great. Katie Simpson says, link to come, but as just mentioned on CBC News Network, the Trudeau government is set to try a new approach to managing Canada's relationship with the United States, according to sources with direction knowledge of the situation. The Trudeau government is bringing in more ministers into the fold to take a more traditional approach to managing the relationship. So Miss Freeland is changing the way they connect with the United States, and that's probably a good thing because of the conflict between Miss Freeland and Mr. Trump. Chrystia Freeland had the run of the portfolio for DPM and financial management, had the run of portfolios since shortly after President Donald Trump was elected. The Canadian Foreign Minister will deal with the U.S. Secretary of State. The Trade Minister will deal with the U.S. TR counterpart. The Public Safety Minister will continue to be a key player in the ongoing discussion around COVID-related border closures, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, that snuck in before. It was supposed to be this tab. So what are they going to do going forward with their new Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister? And it says, Canada's Trudeau plans sweeping social welfare reform, sources say. Canada Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is weighing sweeping changes to the country's social welfare system and a series of economic measures that will align Canada with ambitious climate goals, according to people familiar with the matter. The plan to bolster the social safety net will especially help those hurt most by the pandemic and come after Trudeau replaced a fiscally cautious finance minister. Do you think that Morneau was fiscally cautious? I don't think that he was fiscally cautious. He spent liberally. He spent Canada into 3 times the debt of the Second World War in months. So, no, he's not fiscally cautious. Freeland has no experience. None. She hasn't even run a daycare. Like, there's no like, oh yeah, I balanced the books and everything worked out really well. Look at how well I did that there. She was a reporter. It's insane. Okay, back to this. Trudeau replaced former Finance Minister Bill Morneau, who resigned on Monday, with close ally Chrystia Freeland. Trudeau said the pandemic has unmasked fundamental gaps in society and the country needed a long-term recovery plan that addressed issues head-on. This is our chance to build a more resilient Canada, a Canada that is healthier and safer and greener and more competitive, a Canada that is more welcoming and more fair, he said after a cabinet shuffle. Trudeau said he would seek a confidence vote in Parliament over his plan when the body reconvenes in September. That's the throne speech. Cabinet Minister and close ally Dominic LeBlanc said the plan will contain a number of positive ideas that opposition parties have been talking about. Wealth tax, and these include measures on childcare, access to quality housing, and expanded employment insurance program, he told Canadian CBC on Wednesday. I think this is the wrong direction. I think doubling down on I think it's UBI they're probably going to try and introduce, universal basic income, and there's no way to pay for it. There's no way to pay for it. They're going to tax houses, as is been the speculation. Basically, they got Morneau to say that he was never going to tax that, and he didn't lie because he's not going to do it. It'll be Freeland who institutes a tax on the proceeds of sales of houses of primary residence, and that's just speculation. I don't know, and the people who are speculating don't know, but. If you're gonna do these mass giveaways, if you're gonna give UBI and double down on this kind of spending, you've got to pay for it. It's not sustainable long term. It's not sustainable long term. And the people who are getting the money, it's already shown the curb is impacting people's ability to hire for seasonal work and all sorts of other things. So I'm very skeptical that this is going to work well. I'm skeptical that there is going to be any kind of recovery because it's being spent. It's being shoveled out of the country or being repackaged and given to those in need based on what? I don't know. I don't think this is the right move. I think this is wrong-headed, poorly managed, the wrong pick. And there wasn't anybody else. It's not like they had any talent ready to go for the finance minister. I don't think Trudeau expected we to blow up so spectacularly. I think that there might be enough pressure to push the NDP to consider dropping this government, but it's going to take. It might take more failure. It might take more failure because if an election happens, I don't know. I mean, if Peter MacKay, I've heard rumors that Peter MacKay is running away with it. So if an election happens and it's Peter MacKay, all bets are off. I have absolutely no idea what happens because Peter MacKay would be worse than Trudeau. I have no doubt in my mind that he would be worse than Trudeau. So I don't know. I don't know what happens. But here we are. One last story, just because I'm long, and here it is, and it's interesting. The Bank of Nova Scotia, this is the United States Department of Justice. The Bank of Nova Scotia agrees to pay $60.4 million in connection with a commodities price manipulation scheme. The Bank of Nova Scotia, a Toronto, Canada-based global banking and financial services firm, has entered into a resolution with the Department of Justice to resolve criminal charges related to price manipulation scheme involving thousands of episodes of unlawful trading activity by 4 traders in the precious metal futures contract markets. For over 8 years, Scotiabank traders placed thousands of orders for precious metals future contracts in an attempt to manipulate prices for their own and the bank's benefit and to deceive other market participants. And I'll just leave it at that. Wild, right? You can do this for 8 years and then they get a DPA and a $60 million slap on the wrist. I wonder what the value of the trades were. I wonder how much they made. I wonder if it was more or less than 60 million. If it was more, how much more? Very interesting. Wealth tax. It's all sorts of. There are good ideas to curb the crazy, out of control benefits packages to like top level financial people and all that other stuff. But the problem you run into then is those people are then incentivized to destroy your ability to gather people, to campaign, to gather people to your cause. And these days it's easier than ever. You just hire some Antifa thugs. Right? It's a very problematic situation. It's a very problematic catch-22. The people who have lots of money have no problem bending the rules enough to maintain their grip on the money, right? So, it's a hard problem to solve. And I don't think that Mr. Singh is going about it in the right way. I think he's just pandering to his base and saying the things that seem popular. Now, maybe he's playing a higher level game than I think, but man, I gave Trudeau and his team a bit more credit than I think they deserve now that these documents are coming out. So, we'll see. All right, that's enough out of me. Sorry I was late today. There was a McDonald's lunch promised to my nephews, and then I had to get a haircut and all of that other stuff. So I was trying to get in before noon, but then the lunch intervened. So haircut at like 9:30, which is what I'm usually doing my show, and then I got a lunch at 11:30. So it was a whole mess. So I apologize for being late. But thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co, and I'll be at my regular time tomorrow. Oh, wonderful, wonderful.